Amara grew up in the busy city of Lagos, but unlike many around her, she carried a quietness that made her stand out. She was gentle, humble, and hardworking, the kind of young woman who believed in simple joys, helping neighbors, studying late into the night, and holding on tightly to the memory of her late father. He had been her world, her guide, and even though he was gone, Amara lived each day as if she was carrying his love inside her. Life hadn't been easy after her father remarried. Her stepmother never truly welcomed her, and her stepsister Kayamika made things worse. Kayamika was the opposite of Amara in every way. Where Amara was soft-spoken and kind, Kayamika was sharp-tongued and always chasing attention. She was beautiful and knew it, but behind the smile was envy and a mind that never stopped plotting. To her, Amara's goodness wasn't something to admire, it was something to hate. Still, Amara kept her head down and worked hard. She took care of the little things in the house, respected her elders, and dreamed of making her father proud even in death. But Kayamika watched her with burning jealousy, always feeling like Amara was loved more, even when she had no reason to believe it. That envy grew like a shadow, deep and dangerous, waiting for the right moment to strike. In a house that should have been filled with love, greed, and bitterness were slowly tearing everything apart. And Amara, caught in the middle, had no idea just how much her life was about to change. Amara's father had been a man everyone respected. In Lagos, people spoke his name with admiration, not only because he was a successful landowner and businessman, but because he was honest. He worked hard for everything he owned, starting from nothing and building a life many envied. He had land scattered across different states, houses that stood tall in the city, and money saved for his children's future. To him, wealth wasn't just about luxury, it was security. He always said, "What I build is not for me, but for those who come after me." When death came for him, it was sudden. One moment, he was strong and full of plans, and the next, the house was filled with mourning. Amara felt the loss more than anyone else. She cried for days, clutching his photograph, remembering the nights he would tell her stories, the advice he gave, the way he believed in her. His passing left her with a hole that nothing could fill. She didn't care about the riches he left behind. Her only wish was to have him back. But not everyone felt the same. While Amara grieved, her stepmother and stepsister, Kayamika, were thinking of something else. To them, the man's death meant opportunity. They saw the land, the businesses, the bank accounts, and their minds raced with plans of how to make it all theirs. Soon, news spread that the family would gather for the official reading of the will. Relatives from the village, cousins from the city, uncles, and aunties all prepared to attend. Everyone whispered about how much property the man had left behind. Some imagined how generous he might have been. Others secretly wondered who would inherit the largest share. Amara, dressed in plain clothes, sat quietly through these conversations, her heart still heavy. She wasn't thinking about the inheritance. She was thinking about how lonely life felt without her father's voice guiding her. Still, she believed deep inside that her father had thought of her, that somewhere in his will, his love for her would be written down. But in the shadows of the same house, Kayamika and her mother were whispering to each other. They were already planning, already scheming. They knew the wealth was massive, and they didn't want to share a single piece of it with Amara. Her stepmother told Kayamika, "We must act fast. If we don't, she will take what should be yours." Kayamika, with a sly smile, nodded in agreement. While the rest of the family prepared with anticipation, Amara was holding on to hope. She believed her father's legacy would not just be about riches, but about truth and love. What she didn't know was that her stepsister's envy and her stepmother's greed were about to turn that legacy into a battlefield. Kayamika had always carried jealousy in her heart, but after their father's death, that jealousy grew into something darker. She could not stand the thought of Amara having even the smallest share of their father's wealth. To her, Amara was an outsider who did not deserve anything, so she began to plan. Late at night, while the house was quiet, she whispered with her mother about how to take everything for themselves. Her first move was to twist the story of Amara's relationship with her father. She started spreading rumors to relatives, saying things like, "You all know Papa never really cared for Amara the way he cared for me. He just pitied her because her real mother is gone." At first, the relatives dismissed it, but Kayamika didn't stop. She added little lies here and there, telling cousins that her father once said Amara was ungrateful, telling uncles that Amara only pretended to be close to him. Slowly, the seed of doubt began to grow. Her mother joined in, fanning the flames. Together, they painted a false picture. Amara as the unwanted child, the one their father merely tolerated. To people who didn't live in the house or see the truth every day, the lies began to sound believable. But Kayamika didn't stop at words. She knew the real power was in the documents. She secretly got in touch with a corrupt lawyer, a man who cared more about bribes than justice. She promised him a share of the inheritance if he could adjust the will. With money slipped into his hands, the lawyer agreed to twist the papers, changing details so that Kayamika appeared to be the rightful heir. Amara had no idea what was happening. She was still grieving, still holding her father's memory close, while her stepsister was busy rewriting her future. By the time the lies had spread far and wide, people began to look at Amara differently. Cousins who once hugged her now whispered behind her back. Aunts who once praised her father's love for her now nodded knowingly when Kayamika claimed otherwise. The betrayal cut deep. Amara could feel the shift in the air, the way eyes followed her, the way relatives avoided defending her. She wanted to scream, to remind them of all the times her father had proudly called her his daughter, but her voice felt drowned by the lies. When she overheard one cousin say, maybe she really wasn't loved like that, her heart broke. For Amara, it wasn't about money, it was about her father's honor. To have people believe she was never truly loved was more painful than losing all the property. Alone in her room, she cried, clutching the necklace her father had given her, whispering, "Papa, they don't know the truth." But outside her door, Kayamika was smiling, confident that she had won the battle before it even began. The tension finally spilled out into the open at a family gathering. Relatives, neighbors, and friends had come together for a small celebration, but it didn't take long before Kayamika made the moment about herself. She arrived in a shiny new car, the kind that made people turn their heads. Her clothes glittered with sequins, her wrists stacked with gold bangles that jingled with every move. She stepped out smiling like a queen, waving at people as if she owned the world. Amara, on the other hand, came quietly. She wore a simple gown she had owned for years, her shoes worn but clean. She didn't complain, didn't try to compete. She just walked in with her head lowered, her heart heavy with memories of her father. But Kayamika saw her and couldn't resist. In front of everyone, Kayamika raised her voice. "Look at her," she sneered, pointing at Amara. "Still dressing like a beggar. Still living like she has nothing. Oh wait, she actually has nothing." Laughter broke out from a few shallow relatives who wanted to stay on Kayamika's side. The words cut through Amara like a knife, but she kept silent, her hands trembling at her side. Kayamika wasn't done. She circled Amara slowly, her voice dripping with mockery. "My dear stepsister, maybe if Papa truly loved you, he would have left you something. But everyone knows the truth now. You're nothing but a shadow in this family." Gasps echoed in the room, and whispers spread quickly. Some people shook their heads in pity, others exchanged knowing looks. The humiliation was complete. Amara stood there, her cheeks hot with shame, wishing she could disappear. After the gathering, life only grew harder for her. With no inheritance, she had to live a very simple life. She walked to places while Kayamika drove past in her new car, honking loudly just to make a scene. Amara wore the same modest clothes while Kayamika bought new outfits every week, flaunting them at church and in the marketplace. Jewelry sparkled on Kayamika's neck and ears, while Amara's only treasure remained the old necklace her father had given her. The village noticed everything. They whispered when Amara passed, some shaking their heads in pity, saying, "That poor girl. How could her own family treat her like this?" Others, however, seemed entertained by the drama, gossiping about the two sisters as if it were a stage play. Amara became the story on everyone's lips. Through it all, she endured quietly. Her pride was wounded, her heart was heavy, but she refused to beg or fight back with cruelty. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity, even when she was mocked. Yet deep inside, the pain was too much to bear. She often cried alone at night, asking her father's memory for strength. Kayamika thought she had won, showing off wealth that was never truly hers. But in the hearts of many, a quiet respect for Amara was beginning to grow. They could see the difference between empty riches and true grace, and slowly, the tide of whispers began to shift. One evening, when the sun was setting and the compound was quiet, Amara sat alone on the wooden bench outside the house. She had just returned from the market, carrying small items she had managed to buy with the little money she earned helping neighbors. Her heart felt heavy as she thought of how far her life had fallen since her father's death. The memory of Kayamika's mocking laughter still echoed in her ears. It was then that she heard the slow shuffle of footsteps. Turning, she saw Chief Namdi, an elderly family friend who had known her father for decades. His white hair glistened under the fading light, his walking stick tapping the ground with every step. He was a man everyone respected, not only for his wealth but for his wisdom. Amara quickly stood up and greeted him politely, bowing slightly as custom demanded. "Sit, my daughter," Chief Namdi said gently, lowering himself onto the bench. His eyes studied her face, and he sighed. "I have watched you, Amara. You carry yourself with dignity, even as they try to crush you. Your father would be proud." At his words, tears welled up in Amara's eyes. "I miss him every day," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I have no one left in this world." Chief Namdi leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That is not true. You are not alone. And more importantly, your father did not forget you. Before he died, he came to me. He told me something that I believe only you should know." Amara looked at him with wide eyes, her breath caught in her chest. "What is it, Chief?" she asked softly. He paused, glancing around to make sure no one was listening, then spoke in a hushed tone. "Your father suspected that greed would rise after his passing. He told me he had written another will, a true will, that reflected his heart. He said he had hidden it carefully, in a place only you could reach when the time was right." Amara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. "Another will?" "Yes," Chief Namdi nodded. "The one they are parading now has been tampered with. I know it. Your father trusted me with this secret so that when the storm came, you would not drown. He told me where to find it, and I will help you when the day of the official reading arrives." Amara's tears spilled freely now, not from sorrow but from a spark of hope she hadn't felt in months. "Chief, why are you helping me?" The old man placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because your father was my brother in spirit, and because I see his kindness living in you. The truth must not die with him." That night, as Amara lay in bed, her heart raced. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a flicker of strength rising inside her. Unknown to Kayamika and her mother, the battle they thought they had already won was only just beginning. The day finally came for the official reading of the will. The air in Enugu was heavy with expectation as relatives, villagers, and family friends filled the hall that had been rented for the occasion. Men in crisp agbatas and women in colorful headwraps whispered to one another, their voices carrying a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Everyone knew Amara's father had left behind great wealth, and today the truth of who would inherit it would finally be revealed. Kayamika arrived like a queen. She walked into the hall in a flowing lace gown, her jewelry glittering under the lights. She carried herself with pride, smiling confidently as though the entire gathering was just a formality for her victory. Her mother sat beside her, fanning herself slowly, her lips curved into a sly smile. They both looked around the room as though daring anyone to challenge them. Amara entered quietly, dressed in a simple but neat outfit. She sat at the back, her hands folded on her lap, her heart pounding. Chief Namdi had told her to be patient, that the truth would come at the right time. Still, she could not stop the nervousness that crept up her spine. She knew how powerful Kayamika's lies had been, and she feared that even in this hall, surrounded by family, she might be pushed aside again. The corrupt lawyer, the same one Kayamika had bribed, stood at the front of the room with a stack of papers. He cleared his throat dramatically before beginning. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to read the will of the late Chief Obi." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the lawyer. Kayamika leaned back in her chair with a smug expression, already imagining herself as the new owner of everything. She tapped her manicured nails against the table, waiting for the words that would crown her the victor. But before the lawyer could continue, Chief Namdi raised his hand. His voice was calm but strong. "Before you proceed, there is something that must be presented." He reached into his bag and pulled out a large brown envelope, sealed and stamped. Murmurs rose in the room as he walked to the front and handed it to the lawyer. "What is this?" the lawyer asked nervously. "This," Chief Namdi said firmly, "is the true will of the late Chief Obi. He entrusted it to me personally before his death, with his signature and seal intact. I demand that it be read here, before everyone." Gasps filled the hall. Kayamika's confident smile faltered. She sat up straight, her eyes darting to her mother in panic. The lawyer hesitated, his forehead beating with sweat. But under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he had no choice. He tore open the envelope and unfolded the papers inside. At the top was the unmistakable signature of Chief Obi, bold and clear, along with the official stamp. Whispers erupted in the room. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Amara's heart pounded louder with every second. The secret her father had left behind was about to change everything. The hall was so quiet you could hear the sound of paper being unfolded. All eyes were fixed on the lawyer as he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. The villagers leaned forward, relatives clutched their chairs, and Kayamika sat stiff, her face pale though she tried to hide it behind a forced smile. Amara could barely breathe. Her fingers twisted together on her lap as she prayed silently, her heart pounding like a drum. The lawyer began to read. "This is the last will and testament of Chief Obi." His voice trembled slightly as he continued. "I, Chief Obi, being of sound mind, do hereby declare that all my properties, businesses, land, and family mansion shall go to my beloved daughter." The hall exploded with gasps. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some relatives clapped their hands over their mouths. Others turned to each other in shock. Amara froze, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. She thought she must have misheard, but the words rang loud and clear. Everything was hers. The lawyer kept reading, and the words only grew heavier. "To my stepdaughter Kayamika and her mother, I leave nothing, for I have seen their greed and selfishness, and I do not wish for the fruits of my labor to be wasted in there. Let it be known that Amara is the one who carries my name, my love, and my legacy." A loud cry burst from Kayamika's mother, her fan dropping to the ground. Kayamika's face twisted in disbelief, her mouth opening, but no words coming out. She shook her head violently, as though the more she denied it, the more it would change. But the lawyer continued, each line hammering the truth deeper into the room. Amara's tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. For so long, she had been told she was unloved, unwanted, forgotten. For so long, she had endured whispers and humiliation. And now, in front of everyone, her father's voice spoke again through his words, proving that she had been his heart all along. The villagers began to murmur louder. "Did you hear that? Everything to Amara." Chief knew his family well. "Ah, so the stepmother and her daughter have been exposed." Some even clapped quietly, nodding in approval of the justice that had finally come to light. Chief Namdi, who had been watching silently, allowed a small smile to spread across his face. He had kept his promise to his late friend, and now the truth had broken through the lies. Amara stood slowly, her body trembling, her tears still falling. She looked up at the lawyer, then around at the crowd. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Papa, you never forgot me." The hall, filled with noise only moments ago, grew quiet again. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something powerful, the triumph of truth over greed. And in that moment, Amara was no longer the poor, humiliated stepdaughter. She was the true heir, her father's chosen one. The moment the lawyer finished reading the will, the hall turned into chaos. Kayamika's mother let out a piercing scream and grabbed the papers from his hand, shaking them violently. "This is a lie. This is not my husband's handwriting," she shouted, her voice breaking with rage. Her face was twisted, her gelly slipping off her head as she trembled. But the seal and the signature were clear for all to see. No one doubted the truth. Kayamika rose to her feet, her body shaking, her eyes burning with tears of anger. "No, this cannot be. Everyone knows Papa loved me more than her." She pointed at Amara, her finger trembling. "This is a setup. You are all against me." But no one spoke in her defense. The relatives who had once laughed with her, who had once believed her lies, now sat in silence. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed that they had ever doubted Amara. Others whispered among themselves, finally admitting that Chief Obi had seen through the greed of his wife and stepdaughter long before his death. Kayamika's mother dropped to her knees, wailing loudly, beating her chest. "After all I suffered for this man, after all I did in this house, he leaves me nothing? Nothing?" She turned to the crowd, her face streaked with tears. "You people, you are witnesses. This is unfair. They have cheated us." But the evidence lay before them. The sealed envelope, the bold signature, the careful words of a man who had spoken from his heart. Chief Obi had been wise enough to see what was coming, and he had chosen to protect the daughter he truly trusted. Kayamika, in a fit of rage, grabbed her gold bangles and threw them to the ground. "I don't believe this. They will not take this from me," she screamed, stamping her feet like a child. But her voice only made her look smaller in the eyes of the crowd. People who once admired her beauty now shook their heads, pitying her. The proud young woman who had mocked her sister was now breaking apart in front of everyone. Amara stood quietly, tears still shining on her cheeks, but she said nothing. She didn't gloat, didn't laugh, didn't throw back the insults that had been hurled at her for months. She simply stood there, her silence more powerful than any words. The same relatives who had once turned their backs on her now avoided her eyes. Some approached her slowly, bowing their heads, murmuring, "Forgive us, my daughter. We did not know. We believed the lies." Others simply sat frozen in shame, unable to face her. The hall had shifted. Where Kayamika and her mother once held power, now they were exposed, broken, and disgraced. And where Amara had once been humiliated, she now stood as the one her father had truly loved, the one who carried his legacy. For Kayamika and her mother, it was the beginning of their downfall. For Amara, it was the moment her dignity was finally restored. Amara wiped her tears and stood tall in the middle of the hall. All eyes were on her, but unlike Kayamika, who had always craved attention, Amara looked calm and steady. She did not smile with pride or raise her head in arrogance. Instead, she carried herself with quiet dignity, the kind that spoke louder than any words. For months she had been humiliated, laughed at, and treated like she was nothing. Now, with the truth revealed, she finally had the chance to speak. "My father was not just a wealthy man," she began, her voice steady though her heart was still pounding. "He was a man of vision. Everything he worked for was not only for his children, but also for his community. He believed in giving back, in lifting others up. And I will not let his legacy die." The hall grew silent again, everyone straining to hear her words. "I will not use this inheritance to boast or to show off," Amara continued. "Instead, I will use it to honor my father. I will build schools for children who cannot afford to learn. I will open clinics for the sick who cannot pay for care. His name will live on, not in gold or houses, but in the lives we touch and the hope we bring." There was a pause, and then a loud murmur spread through the crowd. People began nodding, clapping slowly at first, then louder. Villagers who once whispered behind her back now shouted her name with admiration. "Amara! Amara! Our daughter!" Tears welled in the eyes of some relatives who had once mocked her. They realized now that she was not only the true heir, but also the only one worthy of carrying Chief Obi's name. Chief Namdi smiled proudly, leaning on his walking stick, as if to say, "This is why your father chose you." Kayamika and her mother, still on the floor, watched in bitterness as the same villagers who used to flatter them now turned their praise toward Amara. The tide had shifted completely. The same people who once pitted Amara now celebrated her resilience, her strength, and her humility. Amara stepped forward, her voice softer now but full of emotion. "To those who doubted me, I hold no anger in my heart. To those who mocked me, I forgive you. What matters now is not the past, but what we build from today." The hall erupted into cheers, louder than ever. It was as though the whole village had witnessed not just the reading of a will, but the birth of a leader. Amara, the girl they once called poor and useless, now stood as the one who would change lives. She lifted her eyes to the sky, whispering silently, "Papa, I will make you proud." And in that moment, everyone in the hall knew they were not only looking at Chief Obi's daughter, but also at the true reflection of his heart. Weeks passed, and the noise of the will reading began to fade, but the lesson it left behind lingered in every corner of the village. Kayamika and her mother, once the center of attention, now lived in silence. The jewelry was gone, the cars sold, and the same people who once praised them now avoided their eyes. Their wealth had slipped through their fingers like sand, and they were left with nothing but shame. One evening, as the sun set behind the mansion that now belonged to Amara, Kayamika walked slowly toward the gates. Her clothes were plain, her face pale from sleepless nights. She stood before her sister, her eyes swollen with tears. For the first time, her proud voice was soft. "Amara," she whispered, "I was wrong. I let greed blind me. I mocked you, I hurt you, and now I have nothing. Please forgive me." Amara looked at her long and hard. Memories of all the insults, the lies, the humiliation flashed in her mind. Yet instead of anger, she felt pity. She stepped closer, her voice calm but firm. "Kayamika, greed may win for a moment, but truth always wins in the end. Remember that. This is not about me winning or you losing. It is about living with honesty and love, the way Papa wanted." Tears rolled down Kayamika's cheeks as she lowered her head in silence. Amara touched her shoulder gently, not with pride, but with grace. Later that night, Amara walked through the grand doors of her father's mansion. But she did not walk in as the poor stepdaughter who had once been mocked. She walked in as the rightful heir, carrying her father's legacy, ready to turn pain into purpose.